This week we're reading the portion of Reeh. Moshe Rabbeinu says to Klal Yisrael, Reeh Anochi Nosi Lefnei Hayom Brocho Klolo. You should see that I am giving before you today blessing and a curse. Seems to be, and Sefarno in his commentary points this out, we're speaking about two extremes. There's bracha, blessing, klolo is a curse. Seems to be there's no neutral ground. I'm presenting before you either the ultimate in the positive direction, or God forbid, a curse which is the most extreme level of negativity. The Sefarno says, Habito, Reish lo yibeinecho al ofen beinoni, Moshe hu aminid barov. It shouldn't be on the mediocre level. Ki omnam enochi nosin l'fnei chayim brocho klolo. I'm presenting before you, I'm giving before you today blessing and curse. Beim shnei aktzavos, it's the two extremes. Ki abrochi atzlocha yosem in amaspik. A blessing is more than what's adequate. Al tzad hayosa atov, in the positive direction. Haklolo hi me'iro mechaseres. It's a curse which diminishes. Shlo yusag hamaspik. Ushneim lefneichem nahasik mima shetivcharu. It's based on what you choose. I mean, factually, there is a middle of the road. Person God deals with Klal Yisrael not as he deals with the world. It's either brocho or klolo. But we have midas harachmim. We have the attribute of mercy. The Gemara tells us in Brachos that Chizkiyahu Melech, Chizkiyahu the king of Judah, he did a number of things which the Chachomim, they praised him for this. There was a book, it was called Sefer Refuah, the book of healing, which was given to Adam Arishon, Adam, that any illness, whatever it may be in existence, the remedy for the illness was in this book. He went and he hid it away. Why? Because people having this book, they stop praying to God. I mean, what is the greatest incentive? To seek out God, to supplicate God when a person has a problem. Very often, what is the problem? It's a health issue. And especially if a person has no direction to deal with it. You become humbled when you realize that you're compromised and you're in a position where you have no control over your life. So by hiding away this book, this causes the Jew naturally to seek a solution. And the only solution is to supplicate Hashem v'rachmi. That's the only way. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us a situation. It's brocho klolo. Of course, there's rachmim. There's the ultimate, or God forbid, it's the most extreme. It's a fact. No nation in the world, since the beginning of existence, has suffered as Klal Yisrael suffered. I mean, other nations, as the Chazal tell us, once God begins punishing a nation, they go into the oblivion. They're ultimately destroyed through the punishment. Why? Because the more he punishes them, the more they bolt, the more they're defiant, and ultimately he destroys us. He destroys them. Klal Yisrael, when he punishes us, ultimately they're humbled and they do tshuva. They pray, they cry out, they do tshuva. But we have short memories throughout history, and that's Golos. Meir Simcha, famous word, in the portion of Chukosai, in his work, Meshech Chochmah writes that if you track the migrations of Klal Yisrael, they enter into a region, into a country, and they come in, they're at the sub-poverty level. After a short period of time, they begin climbing the economic ladder. And initially when they come in, they're dedicated, they're observant, they're committed Jews. And as they climb the economic ladder, their observance, the commitment to God begins waning and totally deteriorating. And they reach heights of power in exile. And when they reach that level, that pinnacle of power in the material, that's when they have the downfall. And the cycle begins over and over again. And over there, Rav Meir Simcha Dvinsk writes this in the end of the 19th century. He says, ultimately, the next Holocaust, the next Tocho, will be in Germany. Why? Because the Jews in Berlin, in Germany, refer to as Berlin as the Jerusalem of the Jews. That was they became so acculturated with the German, they became Germanic, and they were acknowledged for their contributions on many levels. That's where the destruction is going to come from. I always ask, the Klal Yisrael with the chosen nation, chosen by God, with Mamlechas Kohanim and Goy Kodosh, with a kingly nation, with the Am Segula, with God's treasure. And after everything's said and done, as it says in the parasha, Bonim Hashem Atem Hashem Elokechem, you're God's children. But yet, we're chosen. So you could ask the word, chosen for what? No nation has been punished and been displaced and has suffered throughout history as we. The question is why? So we had read in last week's parasha, last week's portion, Moshe Rabbeinu says to Klal Yisrael, Kasher yiyasa Hashem Elokecho, kasher yasi ishis b'no ken Hashem Elokecho miyasreko. As a person disciplines his son, that's the way God will discipline you. So the Orach Chaim HaKodesh writes, if a person sees someone else's child misbehaving, even doing things which are unconscionable, you may be bothered, but you don't react. You don't respond. You turn a blind eye, even if you're bothered. But if it's your own child, you will not tolerate it for a moment. And you will respond and you will react. Why? Because it's your child. My child, I will not accept that behavior, or that standard for my child. Kashiyasi ishis beno. As a person disciplines, punishes his child, what's the value of punishment? It's rehabilitative. It's disciplinary. It's not to hurt the child. It's not to destroy the child. It's to better the child. It's for the betterment of the child. To put the child on a straight and narrow path. Identically, God Himself will discipline you. It's only because of the intimate and love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for Klal Yisrael. This is the reason why He responds and reacts this way. But it's never chas v'sholom that He will destroy us. So therefore, when He speaks about bracha, it's the ultimate blessing. He speaks about klolo, it's the ultimate curse. Because if you're mediocre, it's not too extreme, so what awakens the person? What gets the person, gives him an understanding that maybe he went wrong? We all know that a person has an illness. If a person doesn't have symptoms that his health is failing, ultimately it becomes terminal. When it's terminal, that's when the person realizes. But when the person has the fever is an indication of a problem, you begin investigating to understand what exactly is the problem. The suffering which comes upon us, the displacement comes upon us, that is an indication that there's a problem. Where's the failing? The failing is in the spiritual arena. We're failing spiritually. And because we're failing spiritually, we have to introspect. As the Gemara says in Brachos, that if a person sees Yisurim Boim Alov, suffering coming upon himself, it says, you have to do an introspection. What do you have to introspect? You have problems. There's anti-Semitism. They don't like Jews. Jews are too aggressive. Jews are too conniving. Whatever the way the world depicts the Jew, that's the reason. No. The Jew has to understand everything has a reason, there's a cause. Those things don't happen in a vacuum. They happen because there's a reason why they happen. When the Jew fails, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, when Yeshurun becomes fat and content and secure, he bolts. God says, you think you can do it without me? Let's see how well you fare. And that's what happens. This is what? This is the Tochacha. And the Jew only learns, only realizes what it is, only when the problem arises. So what happens when a person says, Yisurim Boim Olov, Yefashish B'masov? You have to introspect. And the Mesillas Yesharim, the Ramchal writes, what's the terminology? Yefashish B'masov, Yimashmesh B'masov, Yefashish B'masov. Two terminologies. So he explains there's mishmush and there's pishpush, two Hebrew words. If a person wants to discern between inferior quality fabric and quality fabric, he just has to touch the fabric to determine what is the inferior, what's quality. What about if you have two quality fabrics, but one's a better quality? It's not enough just to touch it. You have to rub it. Rub it, and you have to focus and reflect, what am I touching? So, something which is sinful, it's obvious, it's a sin, it's not a mitzvah. But even when you do the mitzvah, what is the quality of the mitzvah? Was it done lishma? Did you do it for the right reason? Did you do it with an ulterior motive? Did you do it in its most complete way? Did you do it with distraction? So even though I did put on tefillin, I did say the Amidah, I did observe Shabbos, but what about the spirit of Shabbos? Was it through going through motions, or was there a feeling of Kedusha Shabbos? I sensed the holiness of Shabbos. When I say Asher Bocha Bona Mikol Amim, V'nosla is Toroso, do I feel really privileged that God took me, that God took us as His people? Or it's something we say, but rather it's not something we feel. These are all deficiencies. So therefore, by giving us bracha klolo, the extremes, not the mediocre type of treatment. If there's bracha, which is more than one needs, that's a sign that you're doing well. And if it's extremely painful, that's a sign that we're not doing well. Because anything other than that, it's like a person has a slight symptom, but a slight symptom is not enough to really arouse and awaken the person to understand he has a problem. There's an Orach Chaim HaKodesh in this week's reading, this week's parsha. Where Moshe Rabbeinu says to Klal Yisrael, Shmor v'shamato is kol advar me'ileh. Shmor means observe. Shamato means to study. All these things which I'm commanding you, l'manyitav l'chol v'necha achrecho, so it should be good for you and your children after you, ad olam forever. Kisasa hatov v'ayosh b'nei Hashem elokecho. When you will do what is good and what is proper in the eyes of God. So the Orach Chaim HaKodesh asks a question. It should say, Shamata u'shmor. First you study, and then you observe. What's the shamor v'shamato? So over here, he writes, says something interesting. He discusses this in Parshas Yisro. There's a question which is asked, the Midrash asks it, the commentators ask it. When God offered the Torah to us, we said, Nasa v'nishma. So we accepted it unequivocally. Yet, at the time of the giving of the Torah at Sinai, it says God put the mountain over our heads and gave us an ultimatum. Gave us an ultimatum. If the Kabbalah mutav, if you accept the Torah, it will be good for you. If not, you'll be buried under the mountain. But we already accepted it unequivocally. So Rechaim HaKodesh explains that when we said Nasa v'nishma, we accepted the Torah. But we find in Pirkei Avos, it says, Asay siyog l'Torah. You have to make fences. All rabbinic laws are fences. All rabbinic laws. Why are they fences? Because the Torah says, to add to the Torah, you're not permitted to add to the Torah. So Chazal cannot legislate new laws. But what about if the reason why they're legislating and promulgating the laws is to protect the Torah itself? That the Torah encourages. Lo sosum kol asher rucha, you should not deviate for whatever they direct you. This is asu meshmer shel mishmarti, make a fence for my fence. This is to protect the Torah itself. So the Rechaim HaKodesh says, accept what I'm giving you today. We accept unequivocally. Torah, the written law, the oral law. What about over the generations? There are going to be endless laws which are going to be legislated by Chazal, by the Chachomim, to protect, to preserve the Torah. We don't even know the extent of that they weren't willing to accept. That was the Kofim HaHarkegigas. And he goes to explain over there, because without rabbinic fences, the Torah itself cannot be preserved. What is a fence? The Gemara tells us that if Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos, we don't blow the shofar. If the first day of Sukkot falls out on Shabbos, we don't take the lulav. If Purim falls out on Shabbos, which is possible in a walled city, if Purim is the 14th, is Friday, so in a walled city in Shabbos, one doesn't read the Megillah. Why? So you say Megillah, it's rabbinical. But blowing shofar on Rosh Hashanah, taking the lulav the first day of Sukkot, it's a Torah obligation. Yet Chazal say one does not take the lulav, one does not blow the shofar. Why? Because there's a concern. Shema yaviren dalam shesarabim. There's a concern you may transport the shofar in public domain 4 cubits, and it'll be a Torah violation. But yet, in the Beis Hamikdash, in the temple itself, they did blow the shofar. In the Beis Hamikdash, they did take the lulav. Why? What's the reason? So the Gemara explains, the Talmud explains, because ein shvus b'mikdash. Rabbinic fences have no application on the Temple Mount. So the commentators explain why. Because what is the reason why one needs a fence? A fence is because since a person is not always cognizant every moment of the moment, we have lapses and we have blind spots. There's a possibility at that moment you may transgress. And what is the whole idea of a fence in the physical sense? You have an 8-lane highway. You have a guardrail. What do you need a guardrail? If you ride the middle lane? The answer is because you never know. A person may daydream, veer to a point. He's too close to the edge. So even if he hits the edge, if there's a guardrail, that protects him not to go off the road. In life, we're not always 100% cognizant of the moment. And because that is the nature of a human being, the Chazal have to establish and legislate fences. The Torah provision of milk and meat is only lo savashol di b'chalevimo, only if the meat is cooked in milk. And only if it's meat, it's not if it's fowl. If it's a bird, not. But yet, you're not permitted to have milk and chicken, or milk and turkey. Dairy product with bird. It's a fence. It's only cooking. What about if you didn't wait 6 hours between the meat and the milk? You're not, because the digestive process is a 6-hour process. So if there's any relevance between the two of them, if Chazal felt they have to promulgate it to this degree, what is the likelihood of failing here? very strong likelihood. Because man is inclined to certain types of foods, and if ultimately you don't keep that distance, ultimately you're going to cross the line and you're going to transgress. That's the fence. So what guarantees the preservation of the Torah? Rabbinic laws. But in advance at Sinai, you'd say it's endless. We have Torah mitzvos. Do we know to what degree we're going to be bound by rabbinic laws, what we call Rabbanons? We don't know. They weren't willing to accept that. He put the mountain over their heads like a barrel. If tukablu Torah mutav, if you accept it, fine. If not, sham take furaschem. Because ultimately, the Torah is going to be undermined. It's going to be compromised. So over here, he says, "Ochena kavoni shemitzuve al shnei dvorim, shemor v'shemarto, echad Torah u'mitzvos Hashem, asher kvar nodu l'Yisrael mipi Moshe." First, we're speaking about Torah mitzvos. Started with Torah and the mitzvos, which was communicated to them through Moshe Rabbeinu. Ubeis asher yigzru Rabboseinu zal, and those that were decreed by the Chachomim, hagedorim v'asiyogim asher yichadshu, the various fences and all the aids which will be promulgated. Torah umitzvos shem yuduim far Torah oma shemor. Shemor means you must observe what was given at Sinai. You must listen. You must heed. Shematis you must heed. We know that S is always an adjunct. Eis kol hadvorim ho'eler. The Rabos hagzer shmirus ugdorim shichat shubseinu zal v'omru kol. It says for now, Eis kol hadvorim. If you want to be guaranteed, it should be all that the Torah should be observed in its entirety. Then you need the Eis. Then you need the rabbinic fences. The only way you could keep the Torah intact in its fullest sense, only if you have the fences. Without the fences, a mitzvah cannot be done completely in its most complete form. As a result of the medium of the fence, the mitzvah will not be diminished to any degree. The mitzvah will be fulfilled in its fullest sense. And it should be good for you and your children. He says the fences which were promulgated by the Chachomim that guarantees the eternity of the generations of the Jewish people. To remove them, to separate them from anything which is inappropriate or anything which has a semblance of that. I'll give you an example. The Gemara says in Avodah Zarah that if a non-Jew touches the wine of a Jew, he's not permitted to drink the wine. The wine, even though the wine wasn't used for libations, which is idolatry, you're not permitted. Why? Because of Benoseim. Because they were concerned, what is the social beverage? Wine is a social beverage. Ultimately, it will lead to assimilation. Bishalaku. Something which is inedible unless it's cooked. And it's something which is served at a formal meal. If a non-Jew cooks it, you're not permitted to eat it. Why? Because through that food there will be an appreciation for the person who cooked it, and that appreciation will create a level of association, a level of socialization, a level of intimacy, which ultimately will lead to assimilation. So how do you guarantee that separateness? So what guarantee? All these fences, they address it at many levels. Rameh Sibra, Vince writes, we commemorate at the Seder the 4 expressions of redemption, the Dalit Sheni Gula with the Dalit Kosas, the 4 cups of wine. So he says, well, why did they choose wine? Have 4 matzahs. Some other food. Why wine? Because something miraculous happened in Mitzrayim. We were separated. There was only one woman during this 210-year period who was defiled by an Egyptian. Shlomis Bas Divri. She was the only one. It's miraculous. They kept separate. So to commemorate, and B'schus Noshim Tzidkonis Niglav Sin Mitzrayim, in the merit of the righteous women, we redeemed from Egypt. But what was that? What was the key to keep the separateness? There was no socialization, nothing whatsoever. But what is that? So how do you commemorate that? What is the beverage? The beverage is wine. So therefore, the Dal Lashoni Gula that we merited to be separate, because we were separate, it's demonstrated through the wine. Therefore, it's 4 cups of wine. That's what he explains. Question, the pasuk is Reeh Anochi. What's the Anochi? First of Reeh. Reeh is what you see. It should say Anochi Dosel Lefnechem Yom Brocho Klal. What's Reeh? Reeh means, we say seeing is believing. The law is that if you have a court and you have testimony in the court, so based on the evidence which comes through testimony, the judges are permitted to rule. Why are they permitted to rule? Because the Torah says if 2 credible witnesses present testimony, testimony is evidence. What about if the court themselves actually see the event? Could they rule on what they see? Maybe the evidence is only through witnesses. Could the Bezdin, the judge themselves, could they be the equivalent of the witnesses? So the Gemara says, Lo Teshmi Gedola Miriyo. If through listening to testimony, that's sufficient evidence. If they see it in actuality, Shmiya can't be any better than Rio. Hearing evidence can't be any better than seeing the event itself. So what is Reeh? What does Reeh connote? It's something, he's communicating it, you should see. It's at a level of clarity. Reeh Anochi Nosel Lefnechem Yom Brocho Klolo. You should see. It's a level of understanding which there's no degree of doubt over here. Brocho Klolo. But what is the Anochi? We find that Shlomo Melech in Koheles, he says, Ani Koheles Melech Yushalayim. He's Koheles, the king of Yushalayim. He says, Hayvel Havola Bakol Hovel. He says, everything is vain, everything is vanity. So, everything is vain, everything is vanity. You know, you have a person who's a righteous tzaddik, who has no relevance to the material world, and you go to a person who lives as a hedonist and you say, you know, you live your life as a hedonist, it's not the way to live. So the hedonist looks at this holy rabbi, who's never been exposed to the material, doesn't even know what it means to enjoy the material. He says, what does this man understand? He barely could afford to put food on the table. He's telling me what the world is all about. He has no inkling of what the world's about. Shlomo Melech says, Shlomo Melech was Chochem Mikol Adam. He was the wisest man who ever lived. He had wealth. He was the wealthiest man. He ruled the world supreme as a king. He says, I could tell you, my level of understanding, my level of possession, my level of power, it's all vain. There's nothing new under the sun. The world itself, it's just a repeat. What was, is, and will be. The world repeats itself. Humanity doesn't change. So Chazal tell us, there's nothing under the sun. What about above the sun? What about in the spiritual realm? There's always new. Each person has his mission, his objective. What's your objective? The objective is not to be a hedonist. The objective is not to be an intellectual animal. The objective of the Jew is to perfect his neshama. So that, and each soul is unique, needs its own level of perfection. We perfect it through how? Through the mitzvos, through the positive and negative commandments. That's how we perfect it. So that's Lamala min Hashemish. But Shlomo Melech says, I know what it's all about. I have it all. I know it all. I appreciate it all. So when a man speaks from that vantage point, people have an understanding and appreciation to understand the shortcomings and the pitfalls of what life is. Moshe Rabbeinu himself, the Gemara tells us, was Gibor. Physically, he was very strong. He was wealthy, had tremendous wealth. Moshe Rabbeinu had a grasp of the physical world, and Moshe Rabbeinu was a melech. Halachically, he had the status of a king. Was more than just a leader. So Moshe Rabbeinu had an appreciation of the terrestrial and the celestial and the spiritual, everything. Reeh anochi nosel lefnechem yom, brachu klolo. I want you to understand and appreciate. I'm presenting to you what's bracha and what's klolo. And when I tell you bracha is bracha, and when I tell you what klolo is klolo. And what is a bracha? Do you know what the ultimate bracha is? Asher tishmu al mitzvos Hashem Elokechem. The ultimate preciousness, infinite preciousness. You listen to mitzvos Hashem Elokechem, shnochi mitzaves hamiyom, which I'm commanding to you. That's it. Could you imagine? Schar b'hayal maleko. We didn't pick over. There's no reward in this world. For the smallest mitzvah, there's not enough time and life you could live that Hashem could reward you in this world. That's for one mitzvah. So what is the value of a mitzvah? What is it? You know, I want to live a palatial life. I want to have only the most refined material, the wealthiest, whatever it is. But what's bracha? It's temporary. Besides, it doesn't address the objective. That's not what you're here for. The Chofetz Chaim explains it with an allegory. The Mishnah tells us in Pirkei Avos that this world is only a corridor, is a prosdo l'traklin. It's a corridor to a banquet hall. It's a pass-through. So he says, what is it analogous to? In Europe, they would have the Basel Fair, which still exists today, but it's literally in the medieval times. They had the Basel Fair. People would come from all over the world to the fair, and they would purchase, whether it's textile, whether it's spices, whether it's silk, whether it's gems, whatever they needed, it was represented in this fair. So since people came from all over Europe, so people were used to different cuisines of food. So they would open every kind of restaurant, every type of inn, every type of accommodation was there to accommodate the various needs of the people. And it was a number of months. This fair would go on. People would come with their money, and they would purchase whatever they would have, and that was the purchase for the year. So these two Jews meet, and it's about a week before the fair's over. So Chaim says to Yankel, he says, Yankel, how are you doing? He says, I'll tell you the truth. The restaurants are just unbelievable. I haven't made it through all the restaurants yet. So he says to him, are you out of your mind? I mean, you're here to purchase whatever your goods, whatever you need to run your business throughout the year. You have a family to support. You have to live yourself. Otherwise, they can become wards of the community. Do you want your family to be poverty-stricken? Once the fair is over, you have nothing. What are you here for? You're here, what, to try out the restaurants? To try all the cuisines? What are you here for? There must be something wrong with you. So Chofetz Chaim says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts people in this world for what? To try to what? To benefit from the material of the world, to live as hedonists, to live as intellectual animals. You only have 70 years, maybe 80 years. So time is short, as it says in Pirkei Avos. Time is short, and what? And the work is enormous. V'balabai is dochek, and the employer is pushing. V'apolim aratzelim, and the workers are lazy. So what do? So you have to wake up. This world is only a pass-through. It's a prosdor. So rather than seeing the ultimate, the objective, people, they get stuck in the corridor. It's like a person goes into the New York subway system. And today, they're refurbishing. You have murals. And the person wants to get on the train to have an appointment in Wall Street. And all of a sudden, the person starts gazing at the mural and he forgets about his appointment. And he's in the squalor in the subway looking at this mural. And you can imagine who painted the mural on the wall over there, what it looks like. They say, what are you doing here? Did you pay the fare to go on the subway to look at this mural? You understand, this is not the Metropolitan Museum of Art over here. What are you doing here? It's the same idea. People become distracted. So what's brocha? Brocha shetishmon al mitzvos Hashem Elokeichem knoch mitzaves chanayom va'klolo. What is the curse? Im lo sishmu al mitzvos Hashem Elokeichem. That is the curse. A cursed person is where you don't get it. Not to get it, not to understand opportunity, which is the ultimate opportunity, which is eternal opportunity, the person's a cursed person. It's like a person is able to get on a train to escape the concentration camp, save himself, save his family. And he chooses not to get on the train, to be busy with something else, which ultimately, in a day or two, he's going to be taken and killed. That he didn't understand, what opportunity, he's a cursed person. That's curse. There's a midrash. The Yalkut explains it basically the same way. The Yalkut, which is a compilation of midrashim, but this midrash Tanchuma. Av Moshe sid lefneim shnei drachim. Moshe set forth before the Klal Yisrael, two paths. Hatova v'aro, the good path and the evil path. Derech chaim v'derech moves, the path of life and the path of death. And what are they? Brachu klolo, the path of blessing, the path of curse. Shelo yu harishon omrim, the evil should not be able to say, Boras olam stam, God created the world. V'lo pirish lanu eze derech tova. God never allowed us to appreciate and say what the right path is. V'eze derech roh, shenifrosh mimeno v'novel lebrocha, that we should separate ourselves from the evil path and we should come to the good path. God never explained it to us. It's interesting. One of the tenets of faith is you have to believe in prophecy. Dibri Nevi'im Emes. The words of the prophets are truthful. Could you imagine a person builds a laboratory for $1 trillion and it has the most sophisticated, delicate equipment, and it's evident you're able to bring about phenomenal things if you know how to use this laboratory. And a person is illiterate or barely can read, and there's no instruction book at any level how to utilize this laboratory. You have this world which, relatively speaking, is almost infinite. Opportunity is unlimited. You mean God never communicated to a human being what the objective, what the value of this life is? He says, figure it out for you by yourself. Where do you begin? Where does it end? It's impossible. So logically speaking, rationally speaking, intelligently speaking, God had to communicate to mankind exactly what is the value of this. How do we approach it? What should the perspective be? Ani balabira. But people have short memories. God destroys the world with a great flood. Noach motze chen b'nei Hashem. He was saved with his children. They saw divine retribution on the world. And how long did it take before they reverted back to idolatry? There were 10 generations from Noach to Avram. Avram took reward for all of them. They were off the beaten track because Avram acknowledged monotheism, that there's a omnipotent being who was thrown into kiln. That's what happened to Avram Avinu. Could you imagine? So how long did it take to forget? They were aware there was a great flood. But what does it mean? Why was there a great flood? Everybody has their own understanding why there was a great flood. The world every so often shifts. That's what brought about the destruction of the world. So the Rashi says, God created the world. He never showed us the path, the proper path, not the proper path. And everybody believes what they want to believe. I always say, you say to a person, do you believe in God? Yes, you believe in God. And what does God want from you? He wants me to be a good person. And what does it mean, a good person? To only do good things. And what are good things? Whatever I think is good. So basically, who is God? God is yourself. Well, God is your own conscience. This is the way people speak. And what is your conscience? What directs your conscience? What drives your conscience? The person's own what? His own inclinations. His own conflicts of interest. That's what the Rashi says. God created the world. He didn't tell us in what direction. What is the proper perspective? Lakach Omer Moshe. Moshe says, Es abrocha shetishmu. The bracha is, if you heed the word of God, to do his mitzvos, to do his Torah. Haklolo. What is the curse? Im lo sishmu. It's there, you turn your back on it. It's not for me. Moshel is okay. So if it's so obvious, if you say to a person, paradise or an inferno, does a person is consider going into the inferno, where it will be incinerated in a moment? Evidently, it's not that simple. It's not that simple. Moshel is okay shoyoshev al derech. It's analogous to an elderly person who was sitting at a crossroads. And it was a crossroads, and there were two roads, one in opposite directions. The first road was briars and brambles, and ultimately it was a straight-pathed road. The other road, beautifully paved, shrubbery, attractive, but ultimately briars. This old man, with his wisdom, he's trying to advise people which road to take. And he would say to them, although initially this road looks disastrous, and it looks like something you don't want to go near, that's the road you should take. Because ultimately you're going to come upon things which you can't even fathom in the positive. And the person who's wise, he heeds the advice of the wise old man. He walks it and he toils. He becomes wary kimo after going a short period of time. He goes in peace, ultimately he arrives in peace. Now, what does it say? The Yalkut uses a term, it's a 3-day trek. If a person lives 70 years, 70 years seems to be a long time. You have to, as they say in the vernacular, you have to hoe that road. It's a tough road to hoe. That's what they say. But it's 70 years. But what is 70 years compared to eternity? It's a 3-day trek. Moshe, it's only 3 days. That's all it is. It's a blink of an eye. After a person lives his life, and looking back, the person says, life is a blink of an eye. It's initially, when you see life before, you say, it's a long time. But once the person lives his life, looking back, it's a blink of an eye. And the Moshe Rabbeinu, it's 3 days. It's a 3-day trek. 3 days, things are difficult. But ultimately, it'll be forever. And what's forever? That a koras ruach of olam habo, even just a whiff of the world to come, is more than, if you encapsulate all pleasure of the physical world, it doesn't come to that. And that is continuous. Olam habo, the world to come. But those who did not heed the word with the wisdom and advice of the wise old man, ultimately they would go and they would stumble at the end. It's like you have a herd. See pictures of buffalo in a stampede, and they're running towards a cliff. The whole herd goes right off the cliff. Ultimately, nichsholim bo. Basof. Kacho Yemoshe pirish l'mei so'umlem hari derech hachayim va derech hamovis. So of course, there's no question. The world is attractive. The world is desirable. Everything else seems there's no glory. But the question is, what glory are you looking for? What glory are you looking for? If it's self-glory, then it's a problem. The world is a lot of self-glory. Nobody's acknowledged for his accomplishments in spirituality, his spiritual accomplishments. And if you're looking for acknowledgments, even the spiritual path, it's a diminished path. Because you have to do it for the sake of doing the right thing, what we call lishma. You know, the blessing that we say on the Torah, when we study the Torah, is V'harevnu Hashem Elokeinu, is Divrei Soroscha B'finu Fiyam Beis Yisrael. We say to Hashem, allow the Torah to be pleasant in our mouths and the mouths of the children of Israel. We're asking Hashem that when we study Torah, there should be a pleasantness. And we say, Hashem, Targileinu B'Sorasecha. We should be accustomed. Accustomed. What is the difficulty? A person studies and he has tremendous pleasure when he studies. He has. But even that person, unless he's conditioned to study, there's always an inertia to get yourself what we call to that point, to study. Because there's always a procrastination. There's always distractions. There's always something else to do. Once you study, you say to the person, did you regret? Definitely not. Did you enjoy it? Yes, definitely I enjoyed it. We ask Hashem, there should be an arevus, a sweetness, a pleasantness. So the Torah itself, Hashem has given us the Torah, which is the mechanism to what? There's the famous introduction to Eicha, where Hashem says, Halavai osi azovu v'torasi shomaru. I wished during the time of the first temple they would have abandoned me, but at least they would have studied my Torah. Shemor sheba maslev mutav. That the enlightenment is an enlightenment in Torah which ultimately would have brought them back. What's the enlightenment? The experience. Being exposed to Torah, being exposed to truth. Ultimately, the truth. Eventually, it filters through. The light filters through, as there's an expression, mat or dochar bechoshech. A slight amount of light pushes away a tremendous amount of darkness. Rabbi Akiva, who was the Oka Horim, Tochen Zeh Bezu, his level of genius, he was able to uproot mountains and grind them together. He was the greatest of the Tanoim, Rabbi Akiva. He originally was an ignorant shepherd, but he had a genius mind. He had a genius mind because he was sitting in the field when he was shepherding his flock, and he was at a spring, at a brook, and he saw how the water over time dripped on a stone and wore through the stone. So he says, Torah itself is compared to water. He says, if that water is able to penetrate a stone, my heart is no harder than that stone. There's no question Torah could penetrate my heart. That's what it's about. What do you mean Torah penetrates the heart? Torah penetrates the heart means that's Moshe Bo Masul Mutav. There's something innate in Torah. It says, Ner mitzvah Torah or. The mitzvah is Ner. That's the material. But what's the illuminator? Seeing is believing. You don't appreciate it. A person believes something to be a piece of glass. It has no value. And then you have the diamond expert, picks it up and shows the person that this piece of glass, what you think is worthless, there's nothing more valuable than that. And the person understands its value after being taught. Is he going to ignore it? He's going to just pass by, gloss over it? Definitely not, because he sees its value. Torah or. There's Moshe Bo Machzul Mutav. The Reb Kiva understood that. Although I have no feeling, I'm shut down. My spirituality hasn't been activated. But just as that water penetrates the stone, Torah will penetrate your heart. That's what we'll do. We say every day in Volat Zion, before Aleinu, we say the Torah should open our hearts. Psachli bi b'sorasecho. Open our hearts. So what do we talk about? The heart only has to be opened. Even if you have a heart of stone, which the Pasuk speaks about, you have Levo Evan, but Torah is able to penetrate that. Opened our hearts with your Torah. The Torah has the ability to penetrate that. And that's what it's about. Over here, he says the Rechaim HaKodesh, Esa Brocha, Lohoyer Kim Levar HaBrocha Museges Miderech Hashem. Besides the Brocha which one is worthy to receive for studying Torah and doing mitzvahs, Odlo Imo Yir HaTov. There's another level of reward. V'ashetishmu Ki Hashmiya B'Torah Hu Tainug Muflo U'Machaya Nefesh. It's a pleasure which is outstanding, and it gives life to one's soul. Ka'omro Shimi Uschi Nafshechem. Listen, and your souls will become enlivened. V'amargish B'Tama Torah. A person who is able to sense the taste of Torah, Tasichenu Nafsho. His soul will say, Ki Olav L'Shalim V'Tov. You feel that you're beholden. Rather than feel you should be rewarded, you feel you're beholden to the one who gave you this opportunity, this gift. If the one who studies Torah and has this exceptional level of enlivenment, pleasure, not only do you not ask for reward, you feel that you should pay for this. It's an experience which is one of life, as what we call it's a life changer. Literally, it's a life changer. There's a story, the Alter of Navardik, who set up 60 satellite yeshivas in Europe, in Lithuania, in Russia. His name was Rabbi Yozil Hurwitz. He was a genius, and he was the Alter of Navardik. And initially, he ran a chain of hardware stores throughout Russia and Lithuania. And he had 60 hardware stores. Chain of hardware stores. He meets Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. And Rabbi Yisrael Salanter says to him, and that's two Jews meet, he says, how are you doing? As we say, Vos Machtayid, well, how are you doing? So he says, and what does a Jew usually respond? I'm making a living. Chmach Leben. So Yisrael Salanter says to him, and Vos is mit Starben? Are you preparing for your death? You're addressing your life, but what about the afterlife? Are you addressing that? You know, he's running this mega company, 60 chain stores of hardware stores. When he heard it, he immediately, and he was a gadol. Even though he was a businessman, he was a Torah giant. He immediately shut down all 60 stores, and for the 60 stores, he opened 60 satellite yeshivas, each one to correspond to one of the hardware stores he had, to disseminate Torah. Understand? Meaning, it somehow pierced him. It gave him such a grasp of truth. He understood, whatever that is. But you realize how much charity you could give. Do you realize how much charity? You know, so let me not give charity. Let me have what it is. Not to facilitate it, I could have itself. I could actually be involved in the process itself. I don't have to facilitate it by supporting it. I could create it. Once mentioned, they built a hospital. Maybe I mentioned this in the past, which I definitely did over the years. And they built a hospital in Poland. And all the philanthropists who gave for the building, for the equipment, for the windows, for the beds. So they had an opening, and they had a banquet dinner, and the guest of honor was the Chavetz Chaim. And he spoke, And they invited, besides the philanthropist, they invited the Talmidei Chachomim, the Torah scholars, to come. Chofetz Chaim begins speaking, and the first thing he speaks about, he starts praising of the Talmidei Chachomim. I mean, here the wealthy people, they gave money, and we're talking they're observant Jews. They give money to build the hospital. Who does Chofetz Chaim praise? Praises Talmidei Chachomim. And at the end, eventually, he spoke about the donors, the philanthropists who built the hospital. But they understood. They're not going to question the Chofetz Chaim. Maybe he did something which was inappropriate. So they went over to Chofetz Chaim afterwards and said, Rebbe, Rabbeinu, could you explain to us, if we build a hospital, and if not for us, there would not be a hospital, what do you first begin speaking about and praising the Talmidei Chachomim, the Torah scholars? He says, I'm going to explain it to you. Explain it to you. He says, in the merit of these people, people do not become ill and sick. Therefore, people don't need hospitals. But if, in fact, the merit is not sufficient, people need hospitals, that's where you come into the picture. Therefore, who should be praised? The one who prevents illness, who protects Klaus that you should not be subject to illness, or the one who cares for those who succumb to illness? Therefore, the first ones I praise are the Talmidei Chachomim. Then we speak about the philanthropists who build a hospital. If you were able to earn money to support Torah, or you could be the disseminator of Torah, what do you do? If you could be the Yisocher, what do you have to be the Zvulun? And there's no question, as much as the Zvulun studies, he's still not the Yisocher. It's Smach Zvulun b'tzeisecha. Why is Zvulun rejoicing when he goes out as a merchant to the high seas? Because Yisocher bo'olecha. He's rejoicing because Yisocher is in the tent of Torah studying. He's excited. So why is that his fare? Because he was designated by Yaakov Avinu that is the responsibility of Zvulun in terms of what their spiritual makeup is. But if a person has the opportunity to do one or the other, there's no question. Yisocher bo'olecha, that's the ultimate level. So when he heard that, there's no question, he was a wealthy man. He could do many things with that money. He did good things. But still, when he heard about, well, what about the Starben? Are you preparing for your death, for the afterlife? And they'll ask you the question, why not? And you have no answer. Immediately, he closed down all the stores and he opened the 60 satellite yeshivas.